Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very artsy Alta Live. I am so excited to welcome you today to a conversation on PST Art, which, if you are like me, you were not aware that this is one of, if not the biggest art shows in the country. It's taking place, it's put on by the Getty, and it is the largest art event in the United States. It kicks off in this month, runs for 5 months with more than 800 artists and 70 exhibitions. This year's event is themed Art and Science Collide. Our special guest today, Shana Nys Dambrot, has already written actually the first iteration of a new newsletter series we're doing here at Alta called the PST Sketchbook. And she's written about the Jet Propulsion Laboratory and an art project that they've got going on. But she's here today to speak with Alta's own Lydia Horn about kind of PST art as a whole, what's going on, what to expect. If you are an art expert, you might know lots about this. Don't worry, there's going to be great stuff in this conversation for you. If you were like me and had no idea this was even going on, get ready to learn a lot about it. It's fascinating and really exciting. It's a long-term project. And Alta is devoting some serious resources, led by Lydia and our colleague AJ Arona. So stay tuned for our kind of PST sketchbook newsletter, letting you know all the things that are going on around this really exciting art project. Before I let Lydia and Shana dive into their convo, let me tell you a little bit about Alta Journal. Alta is a quarterly magazine focused on California and the West. We are a gorgeous magazine and website. And this current issue is focused on a reckoning of the West. We've got a really cool map pull out inside. We've got lots of art, history, coverage. $50 a year gets you 4 quarterly issues of Alta. You get a little present also in the mail. Right now, it's a book of our past 5 years of cartoons that have appeared in the magazine. We run a free weekly series. You're watching it right now, Alta Live. The California Book Club monthly. Our next guest is Tobias Wolff with This Boy's Life. That is on Thursday, October 17th. Can't believe I remembered that. We've also got several events coming up with San Francisco's Litquake. If you are in town for Litquake, I will be showing up at City Lights on October 16th. We're going to do the California Book Club live at the Verdi Club. I got music. I got a Joan Didion impersonator. It's going to be amazing. Come to that. Andrew Sean Greer, Maxine Hong Kingston, and Jaime Cortez will be there. So we've got a lot of fun events, a lot of really cool things going on. If you like what we do, I hope you'll consider supporting us at Alta Journal. Oh, before I forget, wait, let me give you Shana's amazing credentials. She's an art critic, curator, and author based in downtown LA. I believe it's called DTLA for those of
And
us
you can hear
not
it
there.
saying
And,
hello behind me right now.
Shane is the former arts editor at the LA Weekly. She's co-founder of 13 Things LA and a contributor to the Village Voice, Flaunt, Artillery, White Hot, and now Alta Journal. She studied art history at Vassar, curates and juries exhibitions, writes prolifically for exhibition catalogs, and speaks at galleries, schools, and cultural institutions nationally. She's won a bunch of awards. I've been chatting with her for the past 10 minutes. She is awesome. You guys are going to have a great time. There's a Q&A at the bottom of the screen to ask questions for our guest. There is also a chat. This is a half-hour conversation. We'll go to a little after 1 o'clock. I see someone has asked today. And let's see. Hi from Ramona, California, Oakland. Do let us know where you're zooming in from in the chat. And ask any questions you've got. I'll pop back in about a half an hour and ask those questions on your behalf. Hey, Dan from Santa Rosa. With that, I am turning it over to my friend and wonderful colleague, Lydia Horn.
Thank you. Hi, Shana. I'm so excited to chat with you.
Hi, Lydia. Me too. This is going to be great.
Yeah. So I so appreciate all your help with our first newsletter installment. PST is such a sprawling endeavor. For those who don't know, PST is a festival that's every 4 years, I believe. This is the third iteration, 4-ish. There's some looseness there. And it takes place at museums and galleries across Southern California, mostly in Los Angeles, but I think there's something like 70 museums involved and over 800 artists. And the festival has already started, but I think it's getting sort of going in earnest this fall, and it'll trickle into the beginning of 2025. So Shana, just sort of a high level, I know that the theme is PST : Art and Science Collide.
Well, it's PST : Art again.
Yeah.
Art ampersand science collide. And it's my understanding that there was a pretty intense discourse surrounding the format, so we might as well honor it.
I think if you saw the discourse with the Alta copy desk about our punctuation, yes, I think that's right. But when the theme art : science collide, ampersand : anyway, was announced,
there's also a version where you can write AXS,
Okay.
like the kids do, like art times science. So I don't know if that's easier for you.
But I'm just curious, what do you think about the theme? Because I was reading some other critics, most notably Christopher Knight from the LA Times, and he was saying that art and science are two things that are at odds. Science being something that is so exacting, and art as something that's abstract, ephemeral. When you heard the theme, what was your response?
Well, so I think about it a little bit differently. I mean, I get it. I totally get that. It seems oppositional. However, I think a couple of things. One is I don't love the word collide, because I think that sort of puts you in a mindset of like the forced proximity of things that don't belong together, right? Collide, boom. And I think that existing art history, as well as the current zeitgeist, actually is a much more collaborative, mutual exchange, curiosity, hybrid continuum than that. So again, no one asked me, but I don't love the energy of the word collide in that way, because I don't think that's actually what's happening. That's nitpicking. I'm a huge fan of the initiative. It's just, since you asked.
Yeah.
I think two things. I think one, that art and science have a couple of very important, very fundamental things in common, actually, which is, I think both art and science ask two important questions. One is, what's it like to be alive? What is it? What is life? What is it? What is it for? How does it work? What are we doing here? And the other is, I wonder what would happen if I fill in the blank of your choice. And I think that those are approaches that are actually quite foundational I want to say all. I know all is a useless word in this context, but basically all of that fundamental stance of inquiry about the nature of existence, I think, is actually something art and science have in common. And a lot flows from there. And then there's mutual inspirations, flashes of insight, results of experimentation, the psychology of trying, failing, succeeding, getting funding. But actually, I think at that kind of cultural output level, I think a really balanced understanding of life requires both. And maybe that's a third thing they have in common.
Well, I was thinking about, for those who didn't read your wonderful newsletter, Blended World, which is an exhibition at Brand Library, but sponsored by JPL, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, was sort of the perfect show to kick off with. And just an overview for those who didn't read it, JPL gave 11 artists access to their data, engineers and scientists, and allow these artists to do what they will with that information and make work. Shana wrote about 3 pieces specifically. My favorite was a olfaction related work where an artist was trying to bottle the scent of the moon, the earth, the cosmos, etc. But maybe you could tell us just a little bit, a recap of what you saw at Brand Library, and did anything surprise you?
Yes and no, in that the entire thing surprised me at every turn. But no, in the sense that I was kind of aware of the work of a couple of the artists that were involved, and most notably the Institute for Art and Olfaction. I'm a supporter, and I kind of know about their approach to conceptual perfumery. But I didn't know anything about this project till I got there. And but I also know that there are like culture labs and unofficial kind of artist in residence things that happen at JPL. And so it as an institution within NASA, but even predating their NASA partnership, whatever, merger, obviously had a very robust kind of cultural disposition. And back in the days of its founding in Pasadena, the people that put it into action were part of a larger kind of cultural community where there was a lot of very important avant-garde, even halfway spiritualist kind of work being done. And those were the conversations in which that institution kind of grew in the very, very beginning. And so I think I have no experience there. Like I haven't, worked there myself. But as I've kind of kept an eye on it, the number of artists who said to me, oh, I spent a year talking to them, or, oh, I made a film based on the sea level rise data, or, oh, that there actually is this kind of robust history of JPL as an institution reaching out to the art world. And so, yeah, there's a lot of ways in which that was the perfect thing. And so in that sense, I wasn't surprised, but then I walked in and I saw a field of these beautiful kind of wheat-topped reeds swaying in the breeze. And it turns out, as we mentioned in the story through wizard gadgets, that the breeze they're swaying in is the breeze that's on the surface of Mars. Oh my God. And so, right, and so the simplest object creates this incredible kind of space-time continuum in your brain. And now you're standing in Glendale looking at this manifestation of data, which is basically all it is. And yet it's this really poetic object in the end. And that's, every kind of vignette in the show takes you on a version of that journey. So the olfaction room, yeah, what does the moon smell like is just an amazing, as a writer, like it's just amazing to be able to have a sentence like that. But yeah, it's an array of different scents, and each one, as you mentioned, is tied to a different kind of experience point along this fictionalized journey of a cosmonaut, basically. The moon, the reason I focused on the moon is because it's the only one with in the outer space section. There's a sort of nostalgia for home section with like pancake breakfast and blades of grass and things. But the cosmos, as Saskia Wilson Brown pointed out to me in our interview, you can't smell outer space because you'd be dead at that point if you tried. So they did this really interesting thing where they figured out what the chemical compositions of the places were and then kind of reverse engineered how those things manifest in scent-bearing formulations terrestrially. And so that's interesting. Like I've never, that's insane. But the moon is the one that I picked because that one was the closest they had to witness, which is Buzz Aldrin said what their suits all smelled like when they got back into the capsule or back on Earth. And so there's a sense of that's what at least the air on the moon smelled like. And there's testimonial about that. It's in his book. And so that to me was one of those moments where it's like, oh, there's a physical bridge. There were people like us. And so that went to a place. That's a place. It's not an image. And just those kinds of reminders, I think, are really affecting in the context of imagination. Is to remember that there was like real human experience and phenomenon underlying all of this poetry. I think is really powerful. So the show goes on like that. cyborg artists, you know, it's really, they do, there's a bit of like the culture that's being part of the Europa. There's a culture capsule going in the Europa Moon Explorer. So in case it's found, and it's kind of like water planet to water planet. Ada Limon wrote a poem that's physically going to space in that way. And so, you know, when you start to tether art and science together and you bring all of that fancifulness down into back into the body and the planet, I think that's really powerful. So I encourage everyone to go see for themselves.
Yeah. It's interesting because so many of the pieces at Blended World are so complicated to understand what you're actually looking at, both in terms of intention and just how the work is made. But they're addressing things that are, you know, how you feel the wind on your face, you know, what something smells like really sort of basic things. But at the same time, I'm thinking about accessibility, and you know, just from editing your piece, it took me a lot of research to understand how these works were made. You know, the wind was based off of this complicated algorithm that the rover had captured on Mars.
Excuse me, I said wizard gadgets.
You did say wizard gadget, but I cut it. But is that taking away from our experience of the work because it takes us so long to have to understand it at first?
You know, that's an amazing question. And it's sort of a question that I ask myself like all the time, anytime I'm looking at art and I'm going to evaluate it. Part of my calculation is like, what chance do people have of getting, you know, getting things from it? Intended, unintended, whatever. Like, how are they relating? What's their entry point into the work? And I totally see that. But I will say, I think that if you walked into a gallery with no explanation and saw a field of waving reeds, you probably on your own would go to a different kind of moment. You'd probably go, oh, this is evoking nature, childhood memories, something, you know, you'd be in a kind of a walled-in place with it. And then you find out by simple matter of, you know, reading a little bit of, by the way, really well done wall text, like the didactics are designed to help lay people understand. So and this is a case where like, don't be afraid to read the walls. It's helpful. But that, then you go, wait a minute, this wind is from Mars. And that kind of activates a different part of your brain, like the curious student part. But it's not impossible to understand. I mean, yes, pulling apart the computer code and mechanical sure, who knows? But understanding that sort of magic leap of like, oh, it's not just any breeze. This isn't about my nostalgia. This is about there's wind on Mars. And now I'm thinking about wind on Mars, the last thing I expected to be thinking about at an art show. And I think that's amazing because it just takes you out of whatever assumptions you think you're going to breeze through the show, check it off your list, move on. And it stops you and brings you right into the present where you're actually turn around and look at the work in a whole new way, and a whole other part of your brain is now involved. And I think like that's the goal of all art, kind of, you know, like to keep the person there with you and then have the conversation you want to be having. That's a great trick for any artist to achieve in any context. So yeah, great question. And as a general matter, this is an initiative with a lot of reading. Yes. But I think the best examples are the ones that accomplish this other kind of transformation in your thinking. Yeah.
Have an interactive quality to it, I guess is what you're saying.
That do both, right? It's not just like a better way to interpret data. It's like it's got that aspect that you want from art, something memorable, affecting, you know, I don't want to say beautiful because that's not really always the goal, but certainly something visual art, right? Like with mystery and nuance and something to discover and something to remember and learn and come back to. And that's what I think any artist wants for themselves. So yeah, I was really impressed.
Mm-hmm. And then just sort of on this idea of capturing audiences, do you think, I mean, it's very early to say, we're September 25th, the official launch event with daytime fireworks was only 10 days ago, but do you think PST is making art accessible to Angelenos, you know, and sort of beyond? The reason why I say that is because it's spread across so much more of the city than the areas where art is usually concentrated, where you think of Arts District, Hollywood, and then the West Side. At the same time, I was speaking with another writer, and she told me so many galleries are left out, and Getty did not tap them to feature their work.
True and not true, because there's probably 50 galleries that I can think of. Like almost every gallery that I have, I'm like, no, that's a sweeping statement, but I will say I'm comfortable saying scores of galleries reached out, said, this is the show we'd like to do, heard back, go for it, got the media kit, got all the graphics. We're totally allowed to say they were part of the initiative. They're on the Getty website. There's a whole galleries tab. At the same time, I've heard from a couple of people who were like, oh my God, I didn't even know about it till it was too late and I have something perfect. And most of those people have smartly sort of gone ahead and just done it anyway and been like, since we're talking about science, here's our show. And it doesn't, so you're not on the materials. And I definitely understand why that would be frustrating for people who, you know, but I wouldn't say that they were left out. It's my understanding that there was a team in place specifically in order to partner with galleries. And many of the gallery shows that I've seen that have done so are among the best programs. So.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good and fair point. I mean, the Getty has been very generous with their support of smaller galleries as well.
But to be fair, there are some people, in case you're listening, and I'm not going to say your name, but I know we talked about this, who were like, what the hell? Come on, Getty. Like we just put us on we're perfect. And I think I have no insight into the process by which that was achieved. And so that's all I'm going to say about that.
Well, how smart of those galleries that aren't participating for whatever reason to just sort of piggyback on the theme. I think that's brilliant. So
or to offer a counterpoint, like, hey, are you guys like over having to put hashtag PST on everything?
Right.
Come to our completely not involved show at all and live your normal art world life if that's what you want. And you know, in 13 Things, I try to make a balance. Like I've definitely been on the PST train. I'm an enthusiast. I've been to all of them. I'm a super fan. But I didn't want to, but I wanted to make a point of saying, look, there's a few other things, you know, happening in LA too, you guys. And to honor the fact that this is not everyone's thing. And that, you know, life does kind of go on outside of PST as well, as much as we love it.
Yeah, I
but
noticed
to your accessibility point, I want to say there are institutions who usually you don't think of as having like art programs who are drawn into this orbit, no pun intended. And so you have like aquariums and observatories and science museums and different kinds of things, like, you know, Caltech is doing something incredible that opens this week. So, you know, that kind of thing, I think, could only be a PST Art and Science collide joint, because otherwise, how are you going to convince some of these venues that they belong in the discourse? And so I think that outreach, like, definitionally includes new and maybe younger, say, kids audiences. And so that's something that I really do appreciate about it.
Yeah, and I saw there's the exhibition in oh gosh, what's the Elysian Park, like a tree sort of activation. And
yeah,
do you think
like the road is planting 100 trees, right?
Yeah,
and it's an homage to a piece that was done in the past where the artist planted like 10 times that many, but listen, 100 is amazing. And kind of like within the city limits, right? Like not in some patch of land, half a day's drive that way, but like Elysian Park, where people live and trees are healthy to have in a neighborhood. And so I think, you know, things like that. Yeah. Like when else would they do that except now? And so, you know, applause.
Applause. Do you think that these, you know, more alternative, dare we say, accessible works are going to draw a more diverse crowd, or people who aren't necessarily squarely in the art world?
I really hope so. I mean, I'm one of those people that doesn't understand why we can't have STEAM instead of STEM. All you have to do is put A for art in there, and like it's still amazing, and still a great word, and you know, like what's the problem? So, you know, I'm somebody who studied art. I have an art history degree, but along the way, you find all these other things. Like I know a lot more about European history and certainly Christianity than I would have otherwise learned. I read a lot of texts. I had to learn a little bit of other languages. You know, I have focus for some travels. All that came through art. And so it's not like it exists in some silo where like there's art and then there's the rest of human existence, right? It's everywhere. It's been everywhere. Sometimes it's all we have left from ancient cultures. And so I kind of resent this idea that like studying art history is some cute thing that you do and you're, you know, I think that it's a really, really salient prism on history generally. And so, and then all over the years, if you look at like futurism and, you know, the invention of, you know, oh my God, I mean, what was the invention of photography if not a scientific, you know, project, right? And so I feel that there's been all these previous times of intersection, and this is one of them. And it certainly won't shrink any audiences. And I think I do think it'll grow. I mean, my dad's a scientist, and he took me to museums when I was little because he thought that's what like divorced dads did with their kids. But then we found all these moments of commonality and these design exhibitions based on nanotech at the Museum of Modern Art and things like that, where it was like, hey, it's both of us. That's incredible. So I have that lens on it, and I'm, you know, I think it'll help. I think, yes, in the end, it will bring new people to the conversation.
I was reading about, I think the first email ever sent was at UCLA or USC. I should have checked this before I came on board, but
don't worry, the internet will be happy to fact check
the internet
you.
will fact check me. But they've turned that into a PST exhibition, which I think is awesome, and that is art. And how many conversations have spiraled from that? So with that, I would like to welcome Beth back onto the screen.
I mean, my first question is, how is the first email ever sent to art? Explain me that one, artsy people.
Well, I mean, I'd be super curious to see what it physically looked like if you printed it out. But also too, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. That might be more like literature, a question for linguists. But I think as a sort of, I think if you wanted to have a little bit of fun with it, you could make a case for it as a performance and like an artifact of a performative communication.
Fair enough.
Medium is the message.
I want to know what it says.
Test,
totally.
Test, or like just circling back.
Right. Just a reminder. I just want to pop this to the top of your inbox. Okay.
Good question.
We have a question from someone. I was a little worried about this person, but I actually love the question so much just because I thought you guys could like come in hot. In terms of art, Shana, what are your credentials? And has anyone,
I would say to that, Google is free, but I will tell you if you want.
But wait, the second part of this, which I just love, because it's for Lydia, who is like the queen of fact checking. Has anyone fact checked this? It seems a bit far-fetched to me. So can Can you kind of just tell us a little bit? I briefly did your background, Shana,
I
um,
love the internet.
in
I
terms of
really do.
art, but in terms of PST, what is your, what are you, why are you talking to us today about this and your
Okay, so I mean, again, you were very kind about my biography. I've been an art critic for 30 years, 26 or 7 of them in Los Angeles. I have written extensively. I've won press club awards. I'm the current reigning critic of the year. I'm a Rabkin Prize winner, which is kind of a big deal, I guess.
I've
I
literally
ran the,
never made anyone
yeah, I
announce their
ran the
own awards
newspaper
before,
section for
but
a while.
we were challenged on this.
I'm pretty well known, I guess, as like an art writer. So to the degree that anyone is qualified to write about art, I am. I would,
And you've been,
sir, I'm assuming it's a man. Um,
I
what
likewise was
are
assuming
your?
that.
I mean, I hope that you're cool with that.
Yeah, I welcome it. It's far more
I don't
advanced
know.
than mine. I have no credentials to be here at all. And Lydia, in terms of like PST, what was your, you and AJ are kind of leading Alta's new newsletter and focus on this. How do you fact check art?
That's a really good question. And honestly, I think that I've written about art as well, and I've found that artists are the most challenging interview subjects and the most they care the most about the language you use to describe their work, which for good reason, because oftentimes there's text to accompany work, and that is very deliberate and thoughtful. Um, it's really hard. I think like there's a big emphasis on making sure that you're describing material and process accurately. Um, but otherwise, we all have to respect critique, and that's a really important part of the art practice, whether you're a writer or an artist yourself. Um, and I think each person, you when you read a review of an art show, you're going in with the understanding that this is this one person's experience.
I mean, yeah, I think it is one person's experience, but there's also such a thing as expertise. I mean, what your doctor says to you is also just one person saying something to you, but you assume that they come with a set of, context and an open mind and, are an honest broker of sort of, I think that what I try to do when I'm evaluating work is that it's evaluating. So by what metric? So I would say the metric of success so often is like, is this art doing what the artist says it's supposed to be doing? And that's like, it succeeds or fails. Like, oh, you are saying to me, this is what your art's about, but I'm trying to see it and I don't see it. Is that your fault or my fault? Let's pull through that. Or to say to look at work and provide a helpful historical context. Okay, this work references something that went on in the 60s. Let me take a second and tell you a little bit about that. So now when we come back, you know what it's in dialogue with, or, just to like help. Like I view criticism as a way of opening doors and building bridges and bringing in people into the conversation. Like the way I do it, I don't go top down, this is what I think and I'm right. I may feel that way, but I don't do that in the writing because I want the writing to be as evocative and helpful to the reader slash audience as it can be. And I don't really write that many negative reviews because I am just not a person who likes to dwell on failures. And I don't want to sort of spend my time thinking more about something that I found boring or distasteful. So that's just me though. Every writer does that different. Some people feel a responsibility to call bad shit out, and I totally respect that. And that's just not me, but there's a place for that as well, of course. So I would say like my knowledge of the things that came before could help, and pointing things out could help enrich the viewer's experience of the work. And that's I think inarguably like a good thing.
And I think a big part of reading critique, what makes it so valuable is references. When I was getting my MFA, that was a really important thing when we would show our work and say, your work is reminiscent of Vivian Mayer or whatever, if I were to flatter myself. But that's such an important piece of understanding work, because art is collaborative, and I think that understanding where someone else's references is incredibly helpful.
All right, with that, we're running out of time. We're getting a couple of questions just in terms of Shana, where does Shana live? She's based in the LA area, and again, Google, check
That's
her
not
out.
creepy at all.
I do not. We pick up personal emails in terms of contact, but you are more than welcome to Google her. Or
I'm on all the socials. It's all Shana Nys everywhere, whatever social you're on, except Twitter, which I bailed on for my own sanity recently. But Shana Nys, SHANANYS, everywhere. And I do check DMs mostly because I get so many emails that sometimes it's just easier to just, say hi in my messages, but I don't like encourage that. But that's what I do instead of giving out my email. So
and so
that's
for
on me.
people who are asking where she buys her clothes, they like your style, you can reach out on Instagram and communicate with Shana that way if she wants to.
Thank you.
Last thing before we go, we're a little bit over time. Blaze Zariga has looked up the first email ever sent and what it said. We have an answer.
Yes.
In 1971, Ray Tomlinson, an engineer at the computer company Bolt, Beranek and Newman in Cambridge, Massachusetts, sent the first ever email. It was initially an experiment to see if he could get two computers to exchange a message. It was Ray who decided to use the @ symbol to separate the recipient's name from their location. The first ever email message was QWERTYUIOP, QWERTYUIOP. Does anyone know what that means? I do not.
I was hoping for something more fun.
Probably
I was
some
looking for
kind of
something
like
more boring.
query
The top row of a
internal
keyboard.
operation or something.
Oh, Jay points out it's the top.
God, your readers are geniuses.
Row of the keyboard.
QUERTY. Oh my God.
You guys.
Alta has such smart readers, you guys. Well done, team.
Everyone is knowing this. Now all these people.
I love it.
Sean, Tanya, Lauren, everyone's like, Rick
deserves a prize.
They all deserve prizes. That was epic.
That was actually a really fun way to end this. Thank you, Shana, so much. And Lydia, of course, my wonderful friend and colleague, for taking on hosting duties today. It was so great to hear your expertise. And thank God you're both so credentialed to have taken on this conversation. I'm glad you're worthy of Alta Live. Finally, we have some, folks, join us next week. We're going to welcome Lincoln Bramwell. He is the official historian of the National Park Service, and he's going to tell us about Smokey Bear, the history, the complicated, sometimes controversial history of Smokey Bear, not Smokey the Bear, by the way, as you will learn in the current issue of Alta, Smokey Bear. So we're going to talk about that. That's October 2nd next week, I think, Wednesday, 12:30 here. We're going to send you links to this interview. It'll be up later this afternoon. Links to PST. Sign up for our newsletter, PST Sketchbook. Read Shana's article in Alta, and anything else that pops up in today's conversation, we'll shoot you an email later. Thank you all so much for attending. And thanks, of course, to our wonderful
ladies. Thank you so much for having me. This has been such a joy.
So fun. Thanks, guys. Go see art.